Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The champagne had just started to flow, and the band was warming up with some tired cover of a Beatles song when I realized I had made a mistake showing up at all. I knew it from the moment I saw my mom's eyes light up at the sight of Sarah in that dress, pure silk, off the shoulder, subtle beading across the bust like someone whispered elegance onto fabric. People cried when she walked in. Some actually cried. It was like a commercial for a life insurance company, one of those where everything is perfect and someone's always hugging an elderly person. I stood in the back during the ceremony. Not because there wasn't a seat for me, there was, of course, next to my cousin who kept asking if I was still doing the internet thing, but because it's easier to observe from the sidelines. I've spent a lifetime in that exact position. Watching. Quiet. Present, but invisible. Sarah is everything a mother dreams of when she thinks of the word daughter. Bright blue eyes, a waist you could circle with a bracelet, the kind of laugh that makes men look up from their beers. She was always effortlessly magnetic. Even as kids, she'd walk into a room and the furniture would realign itself to face her. Teachers loved her, boys adored her, and our mother, Linda, well, she worshipped the ground she tottered on in those ridiculous heels. Meanwhile, I was the smart one. The responsible one. The thank God she pays her own bills one. I built a company from scratch, hired over 200 people, and had an apartment that made architects nod with respect. But none of that ever really counted to Linda. It wasn't that she hated what I did. It's that she didn't understand it, so it didn't exist. In her world, if it wasn't on the front page of a wedding announcement or followed by the letters MD, then it didn't matter. Sarah was marrying a doctor. Jason, cardiothoracic surgeon. The kind of guy who wears scrubs like armor and talks about his schedule as if he's running the country. Our mother nearly passed out from pride when they got engaged. She'd introduce him to strangers at restaurants. My son-in-law is a surgeon, she'd say, pushing a photo of him like a proud agent at a casting call. When I mentioned I was expanding into hospital administration software last year, she said, "That sounds cute, honey. Like a little side hustle." So there I was, in a dress I bought 3 months ago but hadn't worn because I was told by Sarah, verbatim, "Please don't look like you're trying too hard." The whole room felt like a stage set for someone else's fantasy, and all I had to do was not trip on the rugs or embarrass the family. That was always the rule. Don't steal Sarah's spotlight. As if that were even possible. The reception was held in one of those whitewashed barns turned into a wedding factory, rustic lighting, expensive mason jars with everyone's name handwritten on tiny tags, and a buffet where the mashed potatoes probably had their own birth certificates. People buzzed around the couple like bees to sugar water, offering congratulations like it cost them something. And in the middle of it all stood our mother, Linda, wrapped in navy blue satin, glowing like she'd just married off the last princess of a fading dynasty. I stayed quiet, sipping bad rose and trying to be polite through clenched teeth. I had practiced my smile in the mirror before leaving the house, that half-lip thing that says, "I'm fine, this is fine," but not so wide it shows how badly you want to scream. Then came the moment. Someone tapped a glass with a fork. It was time for the toasts. I expected the best man to go first, maybe Sarah's college roommate with some overly rehearsed memory about dorm life. But Linda, of course it was Linda, grabbed the mic before anyone else could. She stood there like she'd been waiting her whole life for this monologue. "A toast to the couple," she said, but really it was a love letter to herself, to her success as a mother, her beautiful daughter, her genius new son-in-law, her perfect new future of medical grandchildren and Thanksgiving dinners that would finally be normal. She gestured toward Jason and Sarah, then looked out into the crowd with a soft laugh, like a politician softening up the audience before the gut punch. "I just feel so blessed," she said. One daughter married a doctor, the other writes blogs. There was a half second of silence. Then laughter. Not the nice kind. The kind where people chuckle into their napkins because they're not sure if it's mean or funny, but it's definitely not neither. Someone said, "Ouch," behind me. Someone else said, "Jesus." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared at her. Linda beamed. She thought she was being cute. She always thinks she's being cute when she digs the knife in. That was the moment everything snapped, not all at once, but like a frayed wire finally giving out. My skin got hot. My ears rang. I felt my hands shake, but not from sadness, from something sharper, something cleaner. And without thinking, I stood up and started walking toward the mic. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a toast. But what I did have, what I've always had, was the truth. And this time, I wasn't going to swallow it. I don't remember walking up to the mic, not really, not in a conscious way, like you remember stepping onto an escalator or opening a door. It was more like something in me had been pulling the pin on a grenade for 25 years, and tonight, my hand just finally let go. The moment her voice landed that punchline, "One daughter writes blogs," the laugh didn't just echo in my ears. It carved itself into the walls of my chest. I could have let it slide like I had 1,000 comments before. But tonight? Not tonight. Not after everything I'd swallowed to be here. I walked across that polished floor in heels I'd almost thrown out last year because they made me look too assertive. The DJ had already lowered the volume like he sensed something was about to break. People turned toward me slowly, with the kind of half-interested expressions usually reserved for unexpected speeches from a third cousin. Linda, still holding her glass, didn't flinch. In fact, she looked smug. I'm sure she thought I was going to add a little sweet sentiment to balance out her joke, something self-deprecating, maybe a polite laugh to show I knew my place. I took the mic with both hands, adjusted it slightly so it didn't squeal with feedback, and let the silence hang there long enough to make the first few rows uncomfortable. I cleared my throat. Not because I needed to, but because it added weight, made it clear this was not going to be a quick congrats and cheers moment. "Correction," I said, and paused. That one word sliced through the tension, like a box cutter through wrapping paper. "Correction, Mom. I don't write blogs." I didn't look at her, not yet. "I own the hospital Jason works for." The room did not make a sound. Not a gasp, not a laugh, not even the shuffle of a heel repositioning on wood. Just dead, shocked, unprocessed silence. I let it breathe. "I'm the CEO of Valorian Medical Systems," I said slowly, so they could process it like a slow-motion slap. "We build infrastructure software for surgical facilities and hospital administration." And yes, the exact same system that St. Vincent's installed last year. I looked over at Jason, standing with one hand on Sarah's lower back. The hospital where Dr. Perfect here was just awarded a promotion for increasing operational efficiency. "You're welcome, by the way." My voice wasn't angry, it was calm. I sounded like someone giving a quarterly investor report, and somehow, that was even worse for them. I could feel Linda's face changing even though I still hadn't looked her way. The skin tightening, the eyes narrowing just enough to seem thoughtful, but not enough to admit guilt. It was her classic move, pretend the insult wasn't intentional, then pivot the blame for being too sensitive. But there was no room for her to pivot now. I went on, my words slow and measured, like drops from a leaking faucet that eventually flooded the whole damn kitchen. "Last year, my team and I brought in just over $230 billion in net profit. And yes, I said billion on purpose. Not because it was accurate, but because it would make someone twitch and open their phone to Google it. Which is, I don't know, probably 10 times more than Jason's salary as a surgeon." I paused and tilted my head, mocking myself just enough to sound human. "Wait, sorry, I meant million." "Whatever." A murmur rippled through the room, small but audible, the kind of sound people make when they don't know whether they should be laughing, clapping, or texting someone at another table. I could see Sarah stiffen beside Jason, her smile pulled so tight it looked more like a grimace. She wasn't sure what the hell was happening, but she could tell it was no longer about her. And Linda? She was frozen. her glass still in the air, but untouched. I finally turned to her. "I don't talk about my work much," I said, still soft, still smiling because no one in this family ever really asked. "I guess it wasn't as exciting as being with a doctor, right? Or as visible. Or as pretty." I let my eyes linger. But invisible doesn't mean irrelevant. And quiet doesn't mean small. I could feel my breath finally slow, like my lungs had been carrying a weight that now sat in the middle of that ballroom floor. I should have stopped there, maybe. That would have been a mic drop. But I wasn't done. "I don't need applause," I said. "I didn't do any of this for attention. But I also didn't come here to get laughed at like I'm a second-place prize in some family lottery." Jason shifted uncomfortably. I saw his lips press into a line. I knew he recognized the name Valorian Medical, and now he was running the math in his head. He hadn't put two and two together before, because like everyone else, he assumed I was just a quirky, slightly bitter sibling with a decent LinkedIn page. Not the woman who signed the back-end contract that basically paid for half his surgical unit's robotic upgrade. And then he did something unexpected. Something that made half the room look toward the exit. He walked away. Right in the middle of my sentence, Jason turned without a word and walked out of the reception hall like his pants were on fire. Sarah followed him with her eyes, confused, embarrassed, furious, but not surprised. The silence behind him was deeper than anything I'd said. And that's when I knew. Something bigger than ego had just cracked open. It was about 6 months ago when I first found out who Jason really was behind that shiny white coat and the perfect dinner party grin, and the truth didn't hit me like a slap, it hit me like silence, the kind that crawls under your skin and stays there for days, whispering that something isn't quite right even when everything looks polished on the outside. I hadn't been looking for anything either. That's the part that really twisted the knife. I wasn't digging, I wasn't snooping, I wasn't being the bitter older sister poking holes in her golden siblings' happy ever after. I was doing a routine security review for one of our beta tools, a browser extension to flag high-risk financial behavior, and a test case led me into a sandbox site, which rerouted to a real domain, and boom, there he was. His face. Jason. Dr. Jason McAllister, right there on a discreet members-only escort booking site. The kind that's not illegal because technically nobody touches anybody unless they sign an NDA first. His profile didn't use his real name, of course, but the picture was unmistakable. Him, in his scrub pants and tight V-neck tee, phone up, smirking into the mirror like some underpaid fitness influencer. The kind of photo you take when you think nobody's ever gonna see it except the women you pay to pretend you're interesting. I remember just staring at that screen for almost 10 minutes, not even blinking, trying to convince myself that maybe it was some sort of prank, a deepfake, a weird coincidence. But the timestamps lined up, and then there were the reviews. Yes, reviews, 2 of them, both posted less than 8 weeks apart, both describing his generous tipping and professional attitude, which made me want to vomit and laugh at the same time. He hadn't cheated yet, not technically, but he'd booked. Twice. That was enough. The next day, I met him in person. I didn't call. I didn't text. I showed up at his gym at 6:45 in the damn morning, like a ghost he didn't realize was haunting him. He came out, sweaty and smug, probably expecting to start his day with a protein shake and more empty praise. Then he saw me. I wish I could have bottled the moment his face dropped, like a man seeing a familiar face at a crime scene. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I handed him a single envelope, printouts of everything, and said, very calmly, "If you don't end this now, I will." He didn't even try to deny it. That's what shocked me. No fake confusion, no fake anger. Just immediate panic and damage control. He begged. Actually got down to a damn whisper, hands clenched, eyes darting around like someone might be watching. He said it was a phase. He said he never meant for it to go anywhere. He said he was scared of settling down, that the wedding was too big, too fast, too planned by other people. He said he loved Sarah, and maybe in his messed up head he believed that. I should have told her right then. I know that. But I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself people grow, people change, and maybe the fear in his voice meant he would fix it, bury it, clean up whatever moral sludge he'd been swimming in. I told myself that if I blew it up, it would just look like jealousy. Because let's be real, who would believe me? The quiet older sister with no ring, no man, no Instagram perfect love story? So I waited. And I watched. And for a while, it seemed like he was doing better. No more search hits. No more slips. No new activity under his username, or the dozen proxies I set up to monitor him. I let myself believe he'd snapped out of it. Until tonight. After my speech, after the mic drop that left the room tasting steel and cotton, I stepped outside to breathe, thinking maybe I'd gone too far. The air was thick and warm, the kind of summer night that makes your skin feel sticky and your thoughts even heavier. That's when Jason found me. Not Sarah. Not my mom. Jason. He walked right up to me behind the ivy-covered patio wall like we were in some mobster movie, like I hadn't already seen every skeleton in his digital closet. He didn't yell. He didn't swear. He just stood too close, his breath sour with nerves, and said through his clenched teeth, "If you tell her, I swear to God, I'll destroy you." I looked at him. I mean, really looked at him. And I smiled. Because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that it was already too late. The truth wasn't some secret grenade I was still holding. No, it was already rolling across the floor, fuse lit, and Jason's shiny little world had just heard the first hiss. I didn't come to that wedding unarmed, not even close, and if you think for 1 second I stood up in front of 100 guests and flipped the spotlight without a plan in my back pocket, then you still don't know who I am. Because here's the thing, I knew Jason was going to crack the moment I opened my mouth. I knew he'd panic, posture, maybe even try to corner me like he did 6 weeks earlier, when he stormed into my office unannounced, sweating through his shirt, looking like the walls were starting to talk. It was a Friday afternoon when he showed up, somewhere around 4, and I remember because I had just canceled my last meeting and was halfway through a bag of chips when my assistant buzzed me and said, "Dr. McAllister is here and says it's urgent." And something in her voice told me it wasn't the professional kind of urgent. It was the kind that smells like desperation and rotting lies. I told her to send him in, already knowing it was going to be a circus. He came in fast, closed the door too hard behind him, and launched into some clumsy attempt at intimidation before I could even stand up. "I know what you've got," he hissed, his eyes flicking toward my laptop like the files were dancing across the screen. "If you say one word to Sarah, I'll make sure no one takes you seriously ever again." That's what he opened with. No apology. No shame. Just ego and fear trying to play dress up as power. I didn't interrupt him. I didn't say a thing. I just let him talk, because I wanted every word out of his lying mouth to be captured in full, crystal clear audio. See, what Jason didn't realize is that I record every meeting in my office, standard practice when you deal with legal compliance and hospital contracts that can swing 6 or 7 figures based on who remembers what. And that day, I had hit record the second I saw his name pop up on the guest list. He ranted, pacing like a man rehearsing for a courtroom drama. He said I had no proof, even though I did. He said I'd look like a jealous sister, even though I wasn't. He said, and I quote, "If you ruin this for me, I'll leak every dirty detail of your company's finances." I know people. That was my favorite part, because the dumbass clearly didn't realize that Valorian's finances had been through more audits than a federal election. And I just sat there, calm as ever, nodding occasionally like I was sympathetic, like I might be moved by the little boy who'd just soiled himself in the principal's office. When he finally ran out of air, I leaned forward, smiled, and said, "Thanks for stopping by, Jason. This has been very informative." I didn't need to threaten him, because I already had everything I needed. The screenshots, the payment receipts, the appointment timestamps, the testimonials. And now, the cherry on top, a full video file of him trying to blackmail me with a voice that shook like a drunk surgeon in the middle of a lawsuit. I had wrapped it all into a neat little zip folder and uploaded it to a hidden page on my personal blog, which ironically Linda had always dismissed as something kids do in pajamas. Well, Mom, this kid in pajamas just laced your dream wedding with a digital bomb. And then came the masterstroke. A week before the wedding, I printed a single black and white QR code. Then I had 50 tiny slips of paper made, each one tucked neatly under a dinner plate, taped to the underside like a secret prize at a twisted dinner theater. Above the code, in my handwriting font, it simply said, "A wedding gift." From the blog writer. I didn't expect everyone to scan it, but I knew someone would. The first person to find it was a teenager, maybe a niece or a second cousin's kid, sitting at the young people's table, bored out of their mind, waiting for cake and scrolling TikTok under the tablecloth. I saw her flip the paper over, scan the code with her phone, and tilt her head as the video started to play. She gasped. Audible, clear, like the kind of gasp you only hear in movies where the villain's mask gets pulled off. Then the whispering started. It didn't come like a wave. It came like static building slowly in a quiet room, the kind of noise that starts behind your back and crawls up your neck before you even realize the air's changed. One by one, phones came out. Forks stopped clinking. Wine glasses paused in midair. The chatter was no longer polite or celebratory. It was electric, hushed, loaded with the weight of shared scandal. I didn't move. I just sat at my table, legs crossed, sipping water like it was wine, pretending not to notice the slow unraveling that had already begun. Jason returned from outside and immediately knew something was wrong. His face went gray. His pace slowed. Then someone, an older man I think was a distant uncle, held up his phone and asked Jason, "Is this real?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes darting. A man surrounded by shadows, finally seeing they all look like him. And I smiled again. Not because I ruined anything, but because the truth finally spoke for itself. It didn't all collapse at once, not in that loud, explosive way where someone screams and a chair goes flying and the cake hits the floor like a bad sitcom finale. No, it unraveled slowly, like someone pulling a loose thread from an expensive dress, quietly and deliberately, until the whole thing buckled without a single warning snap. The music didn't even stop right away, which made it all the more surreal, because while the whispers grew into murmurs and the murmurs into sideways glances and startled gasps, the speakers still buzzed with some generic pop song meant to fill dead air while people made their way to the dessert table. Jason was the first to truly vanish. He left in silence, without a word to Sarah, without even a last attempt to explain himself or salvage whatever illusion he'd wrapped himself in for the past year. One minute he was standing in the center of it all, red-faced and twitching like a cornered animal, and the next he was gone, just a shape slipping out the door and into the parking lot under that soft amber barn light, like a bad decision, slinking off into the dark where it belonged. Sarah stood still in her wedding dress, her veil slightly crooked, her hands trembling with that awful, quiet confusion that only comes when your entire future walks out on you in front of everyone you know. Someone tried to touch her shoulder. I think it was Aunt Marie, but she shook it off hard, almost violently, and then turned her eyes on me, sharp and wet and loaded with a kind of betrayal I had hoped to avoid. I held her gaze, even when it burned, because if there's one thing I've learned from surviving people like our mother, it's that you don't flinch when the truth is finally in the room. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her expression said everything she couldn't. Why now? Why here? Why me? And I knew, in her mind, the person who had just destroyed her wedding wasn't Jason, it was me. Because that's how the story had always been written in our family. Sarah was the angel, and I was the storm cloud, the mouthy one, the difficult one, the one who couldn't just let things go. And then, like clockwork, she arrived. Linda. She didn't march toward me. No, she floated like she always did, controlled, polished, all fury wrapped in pearls and self-righteous indignation. Her shoes clicked in perfect rhythm, like punctuation marks on a speech she had already rehearsed. When she reached me, she didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her voice was low and cutting, soaked in venom only years of motherhood can produce. "I hope you're happy," she hissed, her teeth barely moving. "You've ruined the happiest day of your sister's life." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so deeply, wildly insane that I couldn't help myself. "He was buying escorts, Mom," I said, loud enough for a few more people to hear. "He tried to blackmail me." "Is that what you call a happy ending now?" "You humiliated this family," she snapped, like I'd embarrassed her at some PTA meeting and not exposed a man who had no business making vows to anyone. "You could have come to me first." "Right," I said, and this time I looked her straight in the face, no blinking, no softening. "Like you came to me every time Sarah screwed up and you made me cover for her? Like when she took my car in high school and crashed it into a fence and you made me say I was driving so she wouldn't lose her scholarship? Or when she lied about getting into grad school and you told me to help fake the email for Grandma? You mean that kind of coming to you?" Linda's face tightened in a way I hadn't seen since I was 17 and refused to apologize for getting into MIT instead of staying home and going to community college like she'd wanted. Her eyes narrowed, her mouth a thin line of pride and fury holding hands. She didn't reply. She couldn't. "You've never protected me," I said, and this time it came out softer, sadder. "You just kept expecting me to protect you from the truth." "But I'm not a shield, Mom." "I'm not your punchline either." She turned her head away, a calculated move designed to make it look like I had crossed a line. And maybe I had. Maybe I went too far. But I was too tired to feel bad about it. I walked past her, past the stunned faces, past Sarah, who still hadn't moved, past the toppled champagne flutes and half-eaten hors d'oeuvres and the carefully curated decor meant to look effortless, and I left. I didn't even take dessert. I didn't say goodbye. I just stepped into the night and let the cool air hit me full in the face like a slap I actually wanted. My phone didn't buzz until I got home. I poured a glass of red wine I'd been saving for an occasion I thought would look a lot different than this one. The apartment was quiet, clean, still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask questions, just waits. I stood by the window with the city lights staring back at me like tiny judging eyes, and then my phone lit up. One message. From Sarah. Just one word. Why? Not even punctuation. Not even a name. Just the wound laid bare in a whisper. I didn't pause. I didn't overthink. I typed, because you deserved better. Even if you never thought I did. I stared at the screen for a long while after that, waiting for dots that never came. Maybe she cried. Maybe she cursed my name. Maybe she blocked me. I'll never know. And then I said it out loud, to no one, just me and the wine and the window and the questions. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine came with cake. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Once it's done, once the fire's out and the room is quiet again, you don't know who you are without the anger. I didn't cry. But I didn't smile either. And maybe that's what freedom really is when the silence doesn't scare you anymore. Did I destroy everything? Maybe. Or maybe, for once, I just finally chose me.